Great. So I want to get into the your career journey and all of that, but just before we do, when you say meditation and visualization, is it like sitting down, breathing, and visualizing your dreams, like visualizing this year I want to achieve this? Is that the exercise you do? Because some people meditate every single day. For me, it's just like writing things down, writing my goals down. What's your method?
So I learned at about 14 the Transcendental Meditation
Oh,
method.
so interesting. That's Ray Dalio's one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And this, I mean, there's one book, The Power of Why, that was incredible in solidifying this for me. But I think the most basic takeaway is, the meditation and visualization isn't always at the same time. I think visualization is just a habit that you can form, and doesn't have to be spiritual. Like I said, it can be very goal orientated and, you acting towards things. But then the meditation, more than anything, is quieting the mind enough, especially in the world we live in now with all of the distractions around us, to have thoughts come to the surface. And I think often when people meditate, they think, oh, this is a bad meditation because I just spent the last 20 minutes thinking about everything and now I'm even more stressed. It's not a peaceful process. It's not always a tranquil and, quiet process, as you might imagine, sitting on the top of a mountain or something, thinking. It can be quite difficult because you're quieting the mind and nothing but your thoughts are coming to the surface. But when you come out of that, you now are aware of what's bothering you, what you're thinking about, what all the distractions in your mind are. You've brought them to the surface and now you can handle them. And that is, I think, the most distilled thing of why meditation is so effective. And there's a million ways that you can do it and different schools of thought around what meditation is most effective. I think guided meditations, you can find a lot on YouTube, are also particularly interesting. Mm-hmm. But the main takeaway should be what is on your mind and bringing it to the forefront of your mind so you can quieten your mind once you've had some practice. And it is incredibly effective whether it's exam anxiety or you're going into an interview process, because now all those limiting beliefs aren't just sitting there swimming away in your head and driving your actions. You've brought them to the forefront and you've dealt with them, and now you're focused entirely on what you want to achieve. So that's how I look at it.
Is it something you do daily or just before some events?
I definitely try to do it before a stressful event, but I think building it into a daily practice was too difficult for me. I am envious of the people that can manage to do that. I find at least, working it into a routine that I have already. So going to the gym and going into the sauna, I'll think about it during the sauna because what else am I going to do in that time? And so that's kind of how I worked it in. So about twice a week I'll do that. But definitely more or less, I think there's no right or wrong way.
It's super, super interesting. And it's also another digression from the main course of the podcast. But I'm very impressed of how diverse your interests are. And not only they're diverse, you're also super successful in each of them. And I'm curious, how does modeling fit into it? And if you're not comfortable talking about it, it's okay, we can cut it out. But if you can tell us more about it.
Yeah, that I think, so I had a brief period of time before coming into my studies of no clue what to do. And I kind of ran away from home at 17, went and lived in Italy with some friends. And this was like my gap year out of, studying. And I ended up going to Paris and I was modeling for that period of time and, also working throughout that year on different things. But I ended up into the fashion industry. And I think it's funny to talk about now, but at the time I was very lost in a way and I didn't know what I was doing, but it brought forward my insecurities. I was quite an insecure person. And doing that, I sort of was forced to always be in front of a camera, like have a lot of focus on appearances. And more than anything, it made me look a bit more inward to what I was actually interested in doing. And so it was all these kind of uncorrelated events that all came at the same time and broke me through into wanting to do and study what I do now. But yeah, that was quite an interesting period of time. I could never do it now.
So that was the time when you realized you wanted to do medical related things? Or? Yeah,
it was around the same time that year my mom happened to get sick and, I was going down this career of fashion and thinking that I was interested in that. And really, I found myself then thinking, okay, what is really more important? What am I really interested in? I'm not very interested in people looking at my appearances. I was quite insecure about that anyway. So it was a funny way of falling into something and then feeling like I wanted to do something completely different.
And then you go to UCL after this. So after your gap year in Italy, you go to UCL and you're graduating next year.
Yes.
Okay. Inevitably, we're going to talk about hedge funds, I think, and applications. But you were talking about this startup you worked in as well. How did you happen upon that application? Were you sending out a lot of applications, or did it just kind of happen naturally?
Yeah, so I've had a funny experience with applications. I think we were laughing about before, but I've, as I said before, found it incredibly fascinating when you're not in this finance-focused career subject. Of first year, everyone is looking at spring week applications, and I joined a society in the first year, which is Bloomsbury Capital. One of the best things I ever did, I think. Joining a society, as many as you can in first year, I think part of the reason I have broad interest, I joined 10 societies. It was ridiculous.
And Bloomsbury Capital is all about pitching stocks, right? And
exactly.
Picking investments.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the UCL Hedge Fund Society in a way. And so with the internship, I stumbled across it at this careers event. And as I said, it was a unique thing that my interests were in finance because it happened to be exactly what they were looking for. And then I only applied for one spring week and one hedge fund summer internship, not really knowing anything about finance or all of the spreadsheets people have of applications in finance. And it was only those two I applied, and I got both of them.
Manu, how many did you send
Alex,
off? Remind us.
Do you have to?
To remind it every episode.
Every episode I have to talk about my failures. I applied for 121 applications when I was at UCL. I got about 7-ish final rounds, 4 interviews, got rejected from 3, got 1 offer, got the offer pulled because of COVID. So I lost my first finance offer. And then I got a previous rejection call me and say that they have another spot and you were the top of the waiting list. So here's the internship. Did that internship. And then the following year, with that on my CV, luck became a lot better for me because after I joined my master's, now I had a good internship on my CV. I had my master's in undergrad. I think my profile had just gotten better. And after doing 121 applications, you get good at doing applications. You get good at doing tests. You get good at, framing yourself well. You've done so many interviews at this point. And I think I applied for less than 10 at my master's, maybe about 7. And I got interviews from pretty much all of them. And the first one, my favorite one, I ended up getting. And so it really made me think this whole idea of quality over quantity. There's really something to it because the traditional advice is, it's a numbers game. Throw as many as you can. See which one hits. There's thousands of applicants applying for these jobs. Just throw whatever, see what hits, and it'll be luck that gets you your job in the end. So don't do a few applications because you're going to lose. And that does happen to a lot of people who apply for a few firms. But more than anything, now that we've started the podcast and we're doing this, I'm starting to see that the most successful people that we have on this podcast, we had a really successful corporate lawyer in the last episode. That might be out when you guys are watching this. Even she applied for 2 places, got both, or it might have been
3 maybe.
The one firm she applied to.
Yeah, one firm. She had
and this
one,
happens, right? This is common. It's not
this is super common. A lot of the successful people I know who are at the top places, the best places, it turns out they've only applied to that place, and they applied for a few others, but they only followed that process and they weren't really interested in the others. And it's just blowing my mind because from the world I come from, which is economics background, that community, it's all about throw hundreds, just keep working with the numbers. But more and more I'm starting to see this trend, and so now I see it in Stephanie too, and we were talking about that and we were laughing about that earlier on as well. Do you think that's the advisable approach, or do you think you got lucky?
Oh no, that's a really difficult question.
Good question.
I do think that it's hard to say whether the numbers game works, or it really depends on how clear you are and what you want to do. If you have no idea what you're doing, for sure, like try everything. And I do think for some people, those first applications, those first applications, if you haven't had experience with interviews, it's so valuable just to think, I'm not going to get it. I'm going to try my best, but I'm going to use this as a practice round. That's valuable. I think if you are very clear on what you want and you're very set on what you want in a company and you can see it, it's better to spend that extra time really focusing on what they're looking for and what your skills are and perfecting how you display that to them and how you display that you really want them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to appreciate that. I mean, all people really want is people that are very interested in learning, right? So if you're set on this company, maybe don't waste your time with all of the applications. And I don't know, did you have a spreadsheet?
I had a big spreadsheet, multiple tabs, and it spanned everything. It's quite good because at this point, I think I have a good understanding of most industries. Like, I don't know like law and stuff that well, and the audience will see that in the previous episode. Alex was really good in that episode with Divya because you had domain specific knowledge and you understood the industry well.
But not that I'm a lawyer.
Not that you, but you did your research. But like since I applied to so many different types of jobs, like 120 is a lot. Like it's everything. It's consulting. It's investment banking, finance. Like it's anything that you can think of that has some relation to economics. I've applied to it. So at this point, it's just like, okay, I know how like different application processes work, and it was kind of like the start of the podcast as well, because I was like, it took me so long and so much work and so much failure to get what I wanted, that like surely there are people that would benefit from hearing the stories of people that either did it, with few applications, with lots of applications, lots of effort, like struggles. Was it straightforward? How did you do it? Like that was the genesis behind the podcast. It was like, like how is it there are few people on this left tail who have like everything, who have all the spring weeks? Because it's not like, it's like evenly spread out. No, you meet people, they've done like 8 spring weeks, and then you meet the vast majority of people and they have 0 spring weeks. And this kind of distribution is just fascinating and so strange. So it's just like the idea of the podcast really was to like break that down. So that was my sort of experience, like applying. In the end, there was a lot of sort of, things falling apart, things coming together. For me, I found that that experience of me applying for so many firms was a good thing. I had a spreadsheet. It was big. It was elaborate. It was this like monster of a spreadsheet where I was like tracking everything. I had names of people at the firms who I was talking to. But that was my approach.
I mean, let's be honest, like you're saying, you had names of people at the firm. A lot of people who apply for one company and they're successful, either they have like the specific knowledge in your case, or they have that prior connection. For example, like we were talking about Divya, our previous guest in law. Corporate lawyers might have done a first year scheme, they might have done a back scheme. So it's not just entirely about luck, it's about going and finding the luck, right? And building that connection to begin with. Would you agree with that, Stephanie?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it can also be quite difficult because you have this wave of people that are prepared for this first year of spring week applications and they've prepared themselves. It's from about September time that you're really getting ready for all of these and sending them out. So if you've joined university not knowing what you want to do, and you come into this wave of crazy people that are all applying to these companies you've never heard about, and you don't know how to display that you're interested in them because you don't know yet. And once you miss that boat in the second year and you start thinking about what you want to do, it's kind of already sailed, and now you have a more complex process of applying to positions and getting the summers, which are typically maybe a little bit more competitive. So I think it's invaluable, like so valuable to teach people about that, perhaps as they're entering university, and they 100% can play that numbers game, or they can think a little bit about the connections or the interests that they have, the domain specific knowledge that they want to showcase to these companies. And all of those are fantastic ways that will put you ahead of other people. But I do think that there's a little bit of unfairness to being prepared going into university for all of this, and then not having any idea that it even exists. So sometimes I do think that it's better just to kind of start learning about it and be prepared for it in the first year. It's a shame that it's all before you're really ready to have to do these applications, I think.
So Stephanie, in your example, you come to uni, you apply for spring weeks, right? And a summer internship as well. You get both. You do the spring week and you do the summer internship. So spring week is April something. You do that, you go into your first year exams, and then you finish that, you do your summer internship. So on that, like, after now that we got through that, applying stage, actually no, let's dive into the applying stage. Like, even if it was just two of the firms that you applied for, how did you prepare? You get an email saying, oh, congratulations, you're through to the next stage. How did you prepare for those interviews?
Yeah, that was complex. So for the spring week, it's a little bit easier because you are going to be there for a week really to learn about the company. I think one thing I wish I knew is I did not have to know everything before going there. And especially when you're with people that are incredibly prepared, they've grown up wanting this career and they've been reading Warren Buffett's letters since the age of 5. I don't know, like, it feels like that sometimes when you're around these incredibly ambitious people and you're only just figuring it out. So you feel like you have to know everything, and you definitely don't. So I kind of wish I prepared less in terms of the spring week, because I was really stressed thinking, okay, I need to know everything about accounting. My bookshelf of finance books, I haven't read them all yet, but I was like, I have to understand how to think about all of this. For the summer internship, the interview process, that was 7 stages.
Okay.
So this was quite an intense application process, and it was more focused on how you're driven as a person, as opposed to, I always thought, okay, it's going to be questions on how you understand accounting and how you can like talk through how the balance sheet is connected to all of this. And you don't need to get so caught up about that. To be honest, I'd rather teach you to think about it in the right way than you go and get lost on rabbit holes of how to understand this massive world of finance and investing in the first place. But they're more interested in how you're driven and what your motivations are. And so I think that comes back to the meditation and visualization, right? If you're geared towards doing that and figuring out what you want as a person, you're very prepared to go into a place where you're being questioned on what you want and finding out if you really know what you're doing, what you're driving towards. And so that's probably more valuable than reading some of those books that I try to read and do all of that. It's more about knowing what you want, where you want to get to. It's more useful.
Great. So you walk into the summer internship. Do you have any pieces of advice for people currently? Because now it's the summer internship season. Maybe you're watching it and you're at the very end of your internship. But even if you are, starting your internship next summer, you have your offer. Imagine now you applied, you've gotten through, and you have that offer in your hand for the summer internship. Do you have any pieces of advice for someone to impress and secure a job?
This is so individual, I think, because what struck me in the summer internship, there was a small group of us, and we were all quite different. I was the only person not with an economics background, which gave me a little bit of imposter syndrome at the start. And I think imposter syndrome is a topic in itself to prepare for in summer internships. I'm now convinced that no matter who you are, what background you have, what you've achieved in life, you probably have a little bit of imposter syndrome. So that is the first thing. I think if you're prepared for it, it's better because you can start tackling it from the onset. For me, it was a wave that hit me when I first got there. I was like, I'm not smart enough. I don't deserve to be here. And it's quite scary. So thinking about that, and also everyone's interests were different. So when we really use that, if you're thinking about investing, maybe you have a week to learn about an industry that none of you know about. And so everyone has different approaches. And by the end of it, we found when we would do a group project, we already knew each other's strengths and we knew I don't want to say weaknesses, but we knew where to focus on a group project because we all had different strengths. And so rather than going, okay, I need to do like this stuff to make sure I'm better at competing in what everyone else is trying to compete in, which is just being smart, showing you understand accounting, showing you understand how to, digest information. Everyone can probably do that. Everyone's smart. So you're now competing in an area where everyone is trying to be the best. If you differentiate yourself a little bit and you show, this is where my interests are. I know I'm working on the other stuff and I'll try and be as good as possible, but this is where I'm really good. And it's a different thing to everyone else. Now you aren't competing on the same plane as everyone else. You've differentiated yourself and you're competing on a completely different plane. And so I think that's key, finding out what your unique strength is.
Very interesting.